All right. So I have moved you down to this little pull-out tray because I dropped this guy on the ground because my hands are shaking. So we're going to look at it a little differently from here on. All right. So these guys are finished in terms of the bone part. So we have skull, body, back, and feet. All right, they're all done. And then these, we have the skull. And I wanted to show you something. So for me, reactivation is not a bad thing. I'm sorry about the shaking, guys. But you see where I've gotten some paint here. And then on the back, there's a little bit here. One of the good things for me is that if you wet your brush, and I'm just, my water is, oh, well, let me see. Hang on. Okay. So I've just got that a bit wet there. If I now go in here, hang on, that's a little bit much water. Okay, if I now go in here and just touch up that area, I can pull some of that paint off. All right, and then I can go back in and tidy that up. I can come around here. And in this particular case, I've got quite a bit here in the front. So I'm basically going to give that like a light wash with a wet brush. All right, you can see that I've pulled that away. And normally I have some Q-tips in here, but I'm just going to take my paper towel and absorb that paint that I've moved. And now I have a much cleaner connection, and I've cleaned up all the paint that I had under there. So looking at him, I can see I've got some on his wing. Now I need to rest my hands here. So I'm going to go in again with just a wet brush, and I'm going to move that paint off. Okay. So now I've removed the mistake from there. This can happen if it flows too much, if you've got a little bit much on there and it flows down. And then I'm going to go in with my paper towel and just blot that a little bit. And now he is much better. Okay, so why do I do so many at a time? Because if I were to take my next color and put it in here, I just realized I'm pointing at stuff that you guys can't see. If I were to take my next color and let's say I were to work on his pants, so you can see it's still really wet in here. If I start with his pants, they are going to bleed into each other. Now that's fantastic if you want to create a fade. That is one of the other things that I really love about these guys is it makes blending two colors together tremendously easy. But I don't want that for this. So if I work on 8 miniatures at a time, I can let these completely dry while I'm working on the next set, and then I can go back to these and then go back again. All right, so that's it for the monster brush. Now I'm going to come in with my number 1, and it's not in the best shape, but it'll be perfectly fine for basically base coloring. All right, and so these guys, it's hands, face, and that's it. They have boots on, and everything else is armor. So I am doing the inside of the mouth with this as well because I figure they're not going to have bright red, vibrant blood flow inside of the mouth and tongue. So I'm going to go ahead and use my dark color in there. I'm going to fill in those nose cavities the same as I did before. Same again, outline the top of the cheeks and also the inside of the eye socket. I need to put my hands down. Okay. So in terms of like stabilizing when I'm shaking, if I can rest my hands on something, that helps. The other thing is that I have to watch the direction that I paint. So in this case, because I don't want to go onto this top ridge, if I take my brush and just push it up slightly into the underside and almost let the underside kind of catch it, that seems, on most days, to work okay for me. And then if I needed a smaller brush to get in, then I would paint what I needed to with the larger brush. And then I would go in with a smaller brush to get into some of those tighter areas. So with him, we have his hand. And I can see where the sleeve ends. I'm going to try not to get it on the sleeve. I don't want to get it on the hilt of the sword. So that was pretty good. Turn him upside down. Apparently the ATV riders are going home. My colleagues decided they're trying to come to his house. Okay, I can't reach his inner hand with this brush. It's going to be too big and I'm going to get it where it doesn't belong. So I'm going to do, I can do the underside of his skull, but in terms of like the small part beside the eye and his inner hand, I'm going to do that with a different brush. And then these guys only have, actually the face part is so small. I think I'm going to do that with the smaller brush as well. So I'll go ahead and detail the hand with the number 1. And I'm going to count that as being hand, and then the armor plate as kind of resting on top of it. The other thing I think about when I'm painting is where I can stabilize my other hand. And so if I paint this last, then I have something to rest my hand on. Okay. Let's see. The part of his knuckles that are exposed are okay. I can reach those with this brush. The inside of the shield would be a little tougher. I don't know. Hang on, let me rest my hands here. I hold my breath when it's detail stuff. So if I quit talking, it's probably because I'm holding my breath. And that's not intentional. It just happens. Okay. This is a little tricky to get into. This is why I can't do 28 mil anymore. But chibi are fine. Okay. I'm also going to use the top part there to stabilize. Okay. Now, I got some on the shield. In that case, I just licked my finger and got that off. He has boots and armor on. So I think that is going to be it for them. So let me get these other two done and then we'll come back for the next part. All right. So these guys only had that little bit, hands and face. So there's not a whole lot to do on them. They just need to dry. These guys, same thing, just hand and face. I did get his little bit of his little hand there. And when I was doing that, I got paint on his shield and his armor. And so I just did the wet brush to get that off. Then he's the last one, so it's still pooled pretty thickly there, but we're going to let him dry. And then going back to these guys, you can see there's a little bit of a difference. This one, it set up differently, and he actually has more definition on his head. So what I'm going to do, and I quite like that, so what I'm going to do is create a little bit of darker space on him by just adding a second layer in some places. And I'm just, with this, I'm just kind of stippling it on. So I'm just basically pushing my brush on there in a couple of little random places. I want to get the cracks to show up a little bit more there. Let's see. We'll darken in a bit around his face. His fingers did pretty well. Just going to get these teeth so that I make sure that around the jawline, I'm going to be able to have a lot of definition there. His toes could use a little second bit. And this will just flow into the recesses so that when I put the highlights on there, they'll just show up even more. Okay, so let's see. On his back, everything looks pretty good, but see how this is kind of all one color. So I'm going to go towards the bottom of his skull and just add a little bit more. This is all still just pallid bone straight out of the bottle. I'm going to put a little bit more on his arm and down each side of the spine, because I'm going to highlight up the ribs and the top of the bone, the top of the skull. So I just wanted a little bit more darkness on there in some places. Okay, so we're going to let that dry. And the same thing happened on the skulls, on the skull bats. So you can see the bandages are really well highlighted there. The mouth, you can see how it did dry much lighter than when I showed you. And then we've got a couple of places. I'm just going to darken up the bottom a little bit there. That looks pretty good. I'm just going to put dark beside where the lighter lines are, because that's how you can get a nice highlight line. Yes, I did not take off the mold lines because my hands just don't allow for it. Okay. Just put a little bit more here. And then on my other one, sorry, I pushed the desk. I need one more drop. Okay, so on this guy, you can see it's not as defined, and like the other one, he doesn't have as many dark patches. So I'm actually going to go in there and just give him some more definition. It will dry lighter than when you put it on, so don't worry about it being too dark. You can see in his little cracks there wasn't a whole lot of definition. So I'm going to go over top of them to make sure that I get some more definition in there. And then along the bottom, that looks pretty good. Along the bottom here. And I'm pretty much out on the palette. So I'm just going to put a little more on here. Now what will happen when this is completely dry is that when I dry brush over the top, I should end up with some really defined light and dark areas. All right, so that is these guys, and they now need to completely dry. So I'm going to work on editing this video for you and let these guys dry, and then we'll come back and I'll show you the next part.